He is lying on a hospital bed in Louisville, Kentucky. His hands, the same hands that once moved faster than the human eye could track, the hands that floored giants, are trembling now, resting still against a white sheet. Outside, the whole world is holding its breath. It's June 2016, and the man they called the greatest is taking his final breaths. In a few hours, church bells will ring across Kentucky. Presidents will release statements. Boxers who never even met him will weep in gyms from Manila to Havana. But rewind 60 years, and you'll find a skinny, scared 12-year-old boy standing in a police station, crying, not because he did something wrong, but because someone stole his bike. That boy had no idea he was about to become the most famous face on planet Earth. This is the story of how a stolen bicycle turned into a legend. This is the story of Muhammad Ali. Let's go back to January 17, 1942. In a segregated hospital in Louisville, Kentucky, a baby boy is born and named Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., after his father, who himself was named after a 19th-century abolitionist. It's a heavy name for a heavy world. This is the American South during Jim Crow. Black families like the Clays can't eat at certain restaurants, can't drink from certain water fountains, can't sit wherever they want on a bus. Cassius grows up in a modest pink shotgun house on Grand Avenue, the son of a sign painter and a domestic worker. His mother, Odessa, is gentle and deeply religious. His father, Cassius Sr., is proud, talented, frustrated, a man who paints billboards and murals but feels the world never gave him the stage he deserved. That frustration seeps into the house. And young Cassius watches. He watches his father's anger. He watches the limits placed on black men in America. And somewhere in that little boy's chest, a fire starts building, a fire that has nowhere to go. Yet. Then, in 1954, something happens that seems small at the time but changes the course of history. 12-year-old Cassius rides his brand-new Schwinn bicycle downtown with a friend to a bazaar. When he comes back outside, the bike is gone. Stolen. Furious, in tears, he storms into a nearby building, the Columbia Auditorium, where, as fate would have it, a local police officer named Joe Martin is teaching a boxing class in the basement. Cassius tells Officer Martin he wants to find the kid who stole his bike and whoop him. Martin, almost amused, asks the boy, "Do you know how to fight?" Cassius admits he doesn't. Martin says something like, "Well, maybe you should learn before you go looking for a fight." Cassius Clay never does find that bicycle. But he steps into that gym. And he never really leaves. What Joe Martin sees over the following weeks isn't natural talent in the traditional sense. Cassius is fast, unusually fast, but his technique is unorthodox. He keeps his hands low. He leans back from punches instead of blocking them, which every trainer on earth will tell you is a fundamental mistake, a good way to get knocked out cold. But there's something else nobody can teach. He has an obsession. He trains before school. He runs alongside the school bus just to build his stamina, racing it down the street while his classmates laugh and cheer from the windows. He skips meals he thinks are unhealthy at age 12, which for a kid in 1950s Louisville is almost unheard of. This isn't a hobby to him. This is a mission. And soon, that unorthodox, low-handed, backward-leaning style starts winning. Local matches. Regional titles. 6 Kentucky Golden Gloves championships. 2 National Golden Gloves titles. By the time he's 18 years old, Cassius Clay has built a resume most professional fighters would envy, and he hasn't even turned pro. In 1960, he gets the call every young fighter dreams of, the Olympic Games, in Rome. But here's something most people don't know, Cassius Clay is terrified of flying. Genuinely, deeply terrified. He almost doesn't go. He ends up buying a parachute and wearing it through the entire flight, just in case. He lands in Rome shaking, and leaves as a light heavyweight gold medalist, having outclassed a 3-time European champion in the final. He comes home to Louisville a national hero, medal around his neck, cameras flashing. And then reality hits him like a punch he never saw coming. Because this is still segregated Kentucky. And the story, verified by Ali himself in later interviews and his autobiography, is that despite being an Olympic gold medalist, he was refused service at a whites-only restaurant back home. Some historical details of the exact night have been debated by biographers over the years, but the essential truth Ali carried with him for the rest of his life was this: a country would applaud him on a podium but still tell him where he couldn't sit down to eat. That contradiction, hero to the world, second-class citizen at home, never left him. It became fuel. It became the second fire, lit right next to the first. He turns professional. He starts calling himself the greatest before anyone else dares to. He predicts the round he'll knock opponents out in, and then, unbelievably, he does it, again and again. Sports writers nickname him the Louisville Lip, because he simply will not stop talking, will not stop rhyming, will not stop selling tickets with his mouth before he ever throws a punch. People don't know whether to love him or roll their eyes. But they can't look away. And that, it turns out, is exactly what he wants. By 1964, Clay is undefeated as a pro, but almost nobody outside his camp believes he can beat the reigning heavyweight champion of the world, Sonny Liston. Liston is a mountain of a man, a former enforcer with connections to organized crime, a fighter so terrifying that reporters privately worry someone might get killed in that ring, and not necessarily Clay's opponent. The odds against Clay are somewhere around 7-1. Almost every boxing writer in America predicts he'll be carried out on a stretcher. Clay, naturally, has other plans. At the weigh-in, he screams, jumps, and appears half out of his mind with confidence. Some say it was theater, pure psychological warfare designed to unsettle the intimidating champion. Whatever it was, it works. On fight night in Miami, this loud-mouthed 22-year-old dances circles around Sonny Liston. By the sixth round, Liston, battered, exhausted, his shoulder reportedly injured, refuses to answer the bell for round 7. Cassius Clay is the new heavyweight champion of the world. He runs to the ropes and screams at the reporters who doubted him, "I shook up the world." But the biggest shock of that week isn't even the fight itself. It's what happens the next day. Clay announces that he has joined the Nation of Islam, and that he is changing his name. First to Cassius X, and then, given directly by the movement's leader Elijah Muhammad, to Muhammad Ali. In an era when most of white America, and even a good chunk of black America, doesn't understand or trust the Nation of Islam, this is seismic. Newspapers refused to call him by his new name for years, still printing Cassius Clay out of spite or confusion. But Ali is unshaken. He says, famously, Cassius Clay is a slave name. I didn't choose it and I don't want it. I am Muhammad Ali, a free name, it means beloved of God, and I insist people use it when speaking to me. He isn't just changing his name. He's telling the entire country that he belongs to himself, and to no one else's expectations. This is where the story could have simply become, great boxer wins many belts. Instead, it becomes something far bigger, and far riskier. In 1966, at the peak of his career, the United States government reclassifies Ali as eligible for the draft, right in the middle of the Vietnam War. Ali refuses to go. His reasoning is rooted both in his religious beliefs and in a moral objection to the war. He says one of the most quoted lines in American history, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong, no Viet Cong ever called me an asterisk 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 dot." He's arrested. Convicted of draft evasion. Sentenced to 5 years in prison, though he never actually serves time behind bars while his case is appealed. But the punishment that hurts the most isn't the courtroom, it's what happens to his career. Boxing commissions across the country strip him of his heavyweight title. They revoke his boxing license in state after state. At 25 years old, in the absolute physical prime of his life, Muhammad Ali is banned from the sport he loves. For 3.5 years, he doesn't fight professionally at all. 3.5 years of his athletic peak, gone. Vanished. He survives by giving speeches on college campuses, speaking about civil rights and his faith, often to hostile crowds who call him a coward and worse. Financially, he's nearly ruined. Emotionally, he's tested in ways that no opponent in a ring ever tested him. Then, in 1971, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously overturns his conviction. He's vindicated. But 3.5 years of his prime are gone forever, and he has to try to become the fighter he once was, older, rustier, with a whole generation of new contenders hungry to take him down. The most dangerous of them is Joe Frazier, a relentless, brutal power puncher who had actually claimed the heavyweight title in Ali's absence. In March 1971, Ali and Frazier meet at Madison Square Garden in a bout so massive it's simply called the fight of the century. Frank Sinatra is ringside shooting photos for Life magazine because he couldn't get a regular seat. Both men are undefeated. Both men walk out with $1 million purse, an astonishing sum for the era. And in the 15th round, Frazier drops Ali with a crushing left hook. Ali loses, his first professional defeat ever. The invincible man is, for the first time, beatable. This is where a lesser man's story ends. A legend, humbled, fading into retirement with one loss on the record and a body that's taken years of punishment. But Ali doesn't fade. He rebuilds. Which brings us to Kinshasa, Zaire, in 1974, a fight so audacious in concept that promoter Don King had to bring the president of a nation on board just to fund it. They call it the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali, now 32 years old, is set to face George Foreman, the reigning champion, a fighter so powerful he's genuinely feared to be capable of seriously hurting, even killing, a man in the ring. Almost every expert alive at the time predicts Ali will be destroyed. Instead, Ali does something nobody in boxing has ever seen. Rather than dance and use his legendary speed, he leans back against the ropes and lets the ropes absorb the shock, covering up, letting Foreman punch himself into exhaustion round after round. Ali will later call this strategy rope-a-dope. Foreman throws everything he has for 7 brutal rounds. And then, in the 8th round, with Foreman gassed and his hands dropping, Ali explodes off the ropes with a combination that sends the seemingly unstoppable champion crashing to the canvas. Ali is heavyweight champion of the world again. The image of him standing over Foreman, arm raised, becomes one of the most iconic photographs in sports history. A year later comes the Thrilla in Manila, the trilogy fight against Joe Frazier, fought in brutal, suffocating heat in the Philippines. Both men go to war for 14 rounds in what many boxing historians still call the greatest heavyweight fight ever contested. Ali wins when Frazier's trainer refuses to let his fighter come out for the final round. Afterward, an exhausted Ali reportedly says it was the closest thing to dying that he's ever felt. The two men, who had once genuinely hated each other, would spend years afterward with a complicated, painful relationship, Frazier resenting some of the cruel things Ali had said about him to sell tickets, calling him ignorant and worse, words Ali later expressed regret over. By the early 1980s, the man who once moved like lightning is slowing down. He loses to Larry Holmes in 1980 in a fight many people, including Ali's own doctors, believe should never have happened. He fights one final time in December 1981, loses to Trevor Berbick, and retires for good, holding a professional record of 56 wins and 5 losses, with 37 knockouts. Away from the ring, Ali's personal life was just as dramatic as his career. He married 4 times, to Sanji Roy, Kalila, Belinda, Ali, Veronica Portia, and finally Yolanda, Lonnie, Ali, who became his devoted partner through the hardest years of his life. He had 9 children, including Layla Ali, who would go on to become an accomplished professional boxer in her own right, continuing her father's legacy in the ring. Then, in 1984, just 3 years after his final fight, Ali is diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome. The man whose entire identity was built on speed, on movement, on a mouth that never stopped running, begins to slow, to shake, to struggle for words. It is one of history's cruelest ironies. Many believe the disease was accelerated by the thousands of blows he absorbed in the ring, particularly in his later fights against Frazier, Foreman, Ken Norton, and Larry Holmes, when his once legendary reflexes had already begun to fade and he simply took more punishment than he ever had in his prime. But here's the part of the story that so many people forget: Ali didn't disappear. He transformed. Instead of hiding from the public, the man once feared by governments and worshipped by millions became something even bigger than a boxer. He became a global humanitarian. He traveled to Iraq in 1990, personally negotiating the release of American hostages before the Gulf War. He worked with the United Nations as a messenger of peace. He gave away shocking amounts of money to those in need, often quietly, without cameras present, something you'd never expect from the man who spent his youth shouting, "I am the greatest," to anyone who'd listen. And then, in 1996, at the Atlanta Olympics, the world watched a frail, visibly shaking Ali raise a torch to light the Olympic cauldron. His hands trembled. The flame wavered. And somehow, in that trembling, the entire stadium saw not weakness, but pure, undeniable courage. It remains one of the most emotional moments in Olympic history. Of course, Ali's legacy isn't without controversy, and any honest account has to include it. His early rhetoric during his rivalry with Joe Frazier, mocking Frazier's appearance and intelligence to build hype for their fights, caused real, lasting pain, something Ali himself later acknowledged and regretted. His association with the Nation of Islam during a particularly militant chapter of the organization's history drew criticism, including from other civil rights leaders at the time. And his refusal of the draft, while celebrated today as a profile in courage, was deeply divisive in its own moment, costing him friends, income, and the prime years of his athletic career. Ali was not a flawless saint. He was a complicated, evolving human being who grew, who apologized, who changed his views on race and religion as he aged, and that complexity is part of what makes his story so powerful. Here's something most documentaries skip entirely: Ali actually kept his Olympic gold medal from Rome for only a few years. According to Ali himself, he threw it into the Ohio River after that painful incident of being refused service at a restaurant back home, a small act of protest almost nobody knew about until he told the story decades later. Decades after that, in 1996, the International Olympic Committee, moved by his story and his legacy, presented him with a replacement medal during a ceremony at the Atlanta Games, the same Olympics where he'd go on to light the torch. Another lesser-known fact: Ali once talked a suicidal man down from a ledge on a Los Angeles building in 1981, spending nearly 20 minutes calmly talking to a stranger, convincing him that his life mattered, before the man finally climbed back to safety. No cameras were rolling for ticket sales that day. Just a man using his voice for something other than boxing. Muhammad Ali passed away on June 3, 2016, in Scottsdale, Arizona, at the age of 74, after being hospitalized for a respiratory issue related to his long battle with Parkinson's. His funeral in Louisville wasn't just a boxing event or a religious service, it became a global tribute, with people of every faith and background lining the streets for a procession that passed right by the childhood home where a scared 12-year-old once cried over a stolen bicycle. Presidents sent eulogies. Athletes he never even met carried his name into their own careers like a torch. In 2005, the year the Muhammad Ali Center opened in Louisville, President George W. Bush awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States, a stunning, almost poetic bookend for a boy once denied a seat at a segregated restaurant in that very same city. So why does Muhammad Ali still matter, decades after his final fight, years after his death? Because his story was never really about boxing. Boxing was just the arena. The real fight was always about a man refusing to be defined by anyone else's limits, not the government's, not the boxing commissions, not the expectations of a country that wasn't always ready for a black man to be this loud, this proud, this unwilling to apologize for existing exactly as himself. He lost his title not in the ring, but by principle, and got it back by sheer will. He turned a stolen bicycle into gold medals. He turned a banned career into a global comeback. He turned a trembling, shaking body into one of the most powerful images of courage the world has ever seen. He proved that greatness isn't about never getting knocked down. It's about how many times you're willing to get back up, and what you're willing to stand for while you're down there on the canvas. Muhammad Ali once said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." He paid that rent in full, in the ring, in courtrooms, in war zones, on hospital ledges, and in trembling hands lifting a torch in front of the entire world. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us putting it together, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you want more real stories of the people who changed the world, and drop a comment telling us which part of Ali's story hit you the hardest. Because stories like this one deserve to be told again, and again, and again, until nobody forgets the name of the boy who found a gym looking for revenge over a bicycle, and left it as the greatest of all time.